What time does everybody's meeting start?
7 o'clock. Thank you, Eric. Hey, Eric's back doing the time. I know you guys have been waiting for him. Quick shout out to Reed, who reached out today. Reed in Edmonton reached out today, said, can I call you guys this weekend? And I said, Reed, why don't you just talk to us now? He goes, I have a meeting. I said, okay, well, then call this weekend. And then he sends me a note back and says, actually, one of our brethren who burned his life down needs me, and I'm on my way there. So I want to open the meeting with Reed is a pretty powerful executive, and he's going to be mad I said this, but he is. And the reality is he walked out of his office. He didn't have time to talk to an old friend because somebody was out on the street suffering and he needed to go. And I think that's why we do what we do. We open every meeting with a prayer, and Wayne's going to do it tonight.
All right. Heavenly Father, we just come boldly to your throne of grace tonight. We know you are the healer, the restorer, the redeemer, and the breaker of chains, Heavenly Father. Break these chains off of our minds and off of our lives, and let us go forth in power. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Wayne. I knew you could bring it. So Wayne earlier today, because we're in step one tonight, those of you following along. So some of you may not know what being in step one means, but step one requires a depth of brokenness in order to speak to the darkness from which some people cannot possibly find light. And so we wanted to make sure that Wayne spoke to any principality that would withhold any of God's people that are in the darkness. So he didn't disappoint. He asked me, he goes, why would you say I needed to say the prayer when you got pastors in the house? And I said, because we need somebody that can speak life into the darkest of places. So if you didn't feel him, you weren't paying attention. Tonight we're going to take a look at step one. Those of you joining us for the first time, what we do is we take a look at the suggestions for a step or so a week directly out of this book, and we use this book in 12-Step Recovery. Why?
Because it works.
Yeah, the process described by the authors of this book's been proven to work for addicts of the hopeless variety, addicts to alcohol and other substances, and in fact, addicts to all kinds of different behaviors, right? Because we treat a human condition here, not necessarily an addictive disorder. Yes? Amen. So in step one, I like to apologize in advance to people who haven't gone through a step one experience, because there's going to be some highs and some lows. It's going to be some pain inflicted as you bring to consciousness some experiences. And then we're also going to talk to the life in you and try and inspire a little bit. So it may be a bit of a roller coaster, but please be warned, I cannot speak to you of powerlessness and unmanageability without inflicting a little bit of pain on your psyche. Does that make sense? So this first step experience we're going to launch into in a minute, but the one thing I do like to show people is why we do exactly what we do according to the authors. And I'm in the forward to the first edition, those of you following along, and they tell us who the we is that are the authors of this book. And that makes a big difference to people who have sat in rooms and been confused about, people pointing to a sign that said we did this and we did that, and we're a we program and all these types of things, and they can be confusing because they've told us precisely who the we is and precisely what they did. And if they're not coming out of here, they're not in the program. They may be in a fellowship and they may well be sharing their experience, but they're not sharing this experience. Does that make sense? All right, so it says, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. So they've told us who the we is. Who's the we? The first 100. And then it says to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. So what's the purpose of the book?
To show other alcoholics
Notice how they didn't say tell. If you were just going to read a book, that would be a telling, wouldn't it? But this actually requires a showing. We've got to not only match this testimony with our walk, but we also have to sit down one-on-one and show them how we find our experience in the book, same way someone did for us, which keeps us tied together for these last 90 years. Yes? All right. So I'm going to jump from there because I'm not going to get into some of that other today. I'm going to go over to Bill's story. And nope, I'm going to go to the doctor's opinion. I lied to you. This is the first time I've done this for those of you just joining online. I'm going to start with Dr. Silkworth's first letter, which is a smaller text, and we'll kind of look at what Dr. Silkworth had to say. He's the one who eventually treated Bill Wilson, and Bill Wilson eventually, having had that treatment, he got well and he met Dr. Bob, and from that, this fellowship of all these years and millions of people recovered has sprung. So page XXV, Roman numeral 25, those of you following the book. To whom it may concern, I have specialized in the treatment of alcoholism for many years. So he's speaking to us as a treatment professional, not an alcoholic. That's why it's in a separate place, and that's why it's labeled as the doctor's opinion, right? Because we don't offer opinions as peers, we offer experience as peers. Does that make sense? All right, so in late 1934, I attended a patient who, though he had been a competent businessman of good earning capacity, was an alcoholic of a type I had come to regard as hopeless. So this is one of the few doctors in the world who specialized in addictive disorder at that time, and he had come to regard this type of patient, he's speaking of Bill Wilson, as hopeless. That he needs palliative care, he needs hospice care. So in the course of his third treatment, he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. How many of you have been discouraged because you've had more than one go at recovery? Pretty much everyone we'll ever meet has had that experience to some degree, right? So it took Bill a little while too, and he's the author of most of this. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So as part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conceptions to other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do likewise with still others. This has become the basis of a rapidly growing fellowship of these men and their families. This man and over 100 others appear to have recovered. So the doctor, on observation, saw that this peer-to-peer model, this sharing my experience with someone else that needs the experience I'm walking in, somehow has the potential for rapid growth. Does it make sense?
Yes.
How many of you went to a psych unit in the course of your... Did you ask him if you could go talk to the other patients? Did they let you? I always like to point out a move of God. When I say God, they say power. Most of us have been in a psych unit. Never are we encouraged to go walk in the halls talking to the patients. But in this instance, they let him. So a way was made. Not for one, but for millions. Right? Because we serve an eternal power. Okay. So I'm going to jump from there to the expanded text, but I want to talk about what the alcoholics have an opinion of the doctor's opinion. Because people with addictive disorder, we always have an opinion of everybody's opinion. So, there they are. Come on in. The physician who at our request gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. So the authors are going to talk about their opinion and his opinion, then Dr. Silkworth's going to give an expanded opinion, enlarging on the ideas he talked about in the letter, right? So basically it says, in this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe, that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. Now, why does that matter to somebody living in an active, addictive situation? Do you agree with Denise?
Yes.
Any of you feel really self-loathing and like you just can't do anything right? What happened to my willpower?
Right.
What am I, crazy? So it says that any of us who have suffered this alcoholic torture must believe my reaction to chemicals once I ingest them is not my fault. My flesh is wired to have an abnormal reaction to those chemicals.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And it's important for you to know that, because later I'm going to tell you that your addiction is a calling, not a curse.
Yes.
And you're still going to have to decide to walk in your calling, but you need to understand that this idea that it was your fault or you drank your way into it is patently false. Does it make sense?
Yes.
All right, so it did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life, that we were in full flight from reality, or were outright mental defectives. How many of you got told that? How many of you believed that to some degree it was true? And to some degree, maybe they're a little harsh on me, right? Okay, so these things were true to some extent. In fact, to a considerable extent with some of us. But we're sure that our bodies were sickened as well. So in our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete, which is why we're going to spend some time on what that doctor's discovery is in a minute to make sure we're not confused by some of the rhetoric in fellowship rooms, right? All right, so the doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. How many of you have been interested by this theory, if not confused? How many of you have heard the jokes in our fellowships? I drink and I break out in handcuffs. And I only point that out because this is a fundamental piece of my potential for wellness. So I can't be laughing it off. I need to understand if it applies to me. Does that make sense? So as laymen, our opinion as to its soundness may, of course, mean little, but as ex-problem drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we could not otherwise account. So I'm going to jump from there to the place where he talks about it, because I want to spend more time in other parts of the book today. I'm on page XXVIII, Roman numeral 28. This is the expanded opinion of the doctor. And he says, we believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy. So do you understand all the words that this in medical speak that he used? What does chronic means? It's happening with some kind of frequency, right? And then he says that it's a manifestation of an allergy. So if I have an allergy to peanuts, I eat peanuts, I may swell up and I may not be able to breathe, right? So I'm thinking that about an allergy. This particular manifestation, we have to focus on what an allergy really is. It's an abnormal reaction to something. Yes? So how many of you are drinkers? Okay, I got a few drinkers here. When you drank, did you find that alcohol energized you?
Yes.
It's a sedative. So a medical person, some of you felt that at a deep level. I can feel you feeling. So the reason I call that to your attention is if I am energized by a sedative, a medical person looking at that would go, oh, that may be the manifestation of an allergy. Where's my meth addicts? Did you find that stuff calmed you down? Do I need to point out to you how weird that is? Where's my opiate addicts? Did they load you up with so much stuff that you shouldn't have been able to get up or do anything and you suddenly felt like mowing the lawn? If those things are true, that may be the manifestation of an allergy. And so let's read a little bit more about what he says. He says that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. So how many in a never?
Never.
Not even once. What class are they talking about? They're talking about chronic alcohol. So they're not telling you that you're an alcoholic yet, but they're saying it never occurs with the average temperate drinker. So at least what we have determined about ourselves is we are not temperate. Fair enough? And this is self-discovery. This isn't me telling you, do your own analysis. Okay, these allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. How many of you have discovered how many forms of alcohol there may be? And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, did that happen to you? Once having lost their self-confidence. I've taken people through the steps and said, did you lose your self-confidence? They say, no, I got great self-confidence. I said, well, here, let me unwind it for you. I met you in an AA meeting, and you're sitting with me. What are the chances that happens to people who don't have a drinking problem? Not a high likelihood, is it? So that would be evidence of having lost my self-confidence. Does that make sense? I'm not telling you anything about me, but by the time I was showing up in AA rooms, I had lost my self-confidence. I just didn't know it and didn't want to declare it. All right, so then it says, once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and they become astonishingly difficult to solve. Did you have that experience? Yes. Astonishingly. Yeah. So then it goes to talk about our nature and our resistance. Why Wayne prayed tonight instead of anyone else. Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. Right. They're saying, how many of you had family members who pleaded with you to stop doing what you were doing? If you loved me, you'd stop. And you loved them. And I hope they're not easily disappointed. Right? We chuckle about it, but it wasn't funny at the time. Okay, so the message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. Guys, we're not talking about scaring you with a bunch of gnarly stories. I just want you to know enough about me that I have been in the darkness and I am no longer there. And then you will be inquiring of me how one goes from where you find yourself to where I appear to be standing. Because that's the nature of it. And it says, in nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. I cannot recreate my life without the Creator within me leading me through it. Does that make sense? Because I've shown what I do when I create a life. All right, so I'm going to jump to the bottom of that page. It says men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. So how many of you are sober? Oh, a high percentage of you. That's very good. That's always a good start. How many of you sitting here sober can bring to consciousness, bring to your awareness what they're about to talk about, the sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a few drinks? You do that? It's a spiritual release you're feeling, isn't it? That's a synthetic spirit that continually comes back to try and, right? Because once I know alcohol or heroin or whatever is the problem, all I would have to do is walk away. but this is happening in me. Right? Okay, so the sensation is so elusive that while they admit it injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. How many of you, dying in addiction, absolutely miserable, maybe homeless, maybe incarcerated, somehow convinced yourself you were choosing it? I hear it all the time. It's all about the choices I make. Let me tell you something. Even courts in this land won't convict you for making a decision with an unsound mind. So if you don't believe in mental illness, then we got a whole nother thing going on. But if you've ever been around one of us when we're running and gunning, we can give you a pretty palpable demonstration of mental illness. Yeah? So goes on to tell us that to them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. If I don't do this, what would I do? Right? They're restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by having only a few drinks which they see others taking with impunity. So important you understand that. Restlessness, irritability, and discontent is a sign of your control addiction taking over. The only thing that can treat and overcome a control addiction in the known universe is a little substance called faith. And so you have to learn to recognize what's happening in you or in who you're working with, because restlessness is a symptom of an untreated disorder. Does that make sense? All right. So it says that after they've succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops. So what happens for the phenomenon of craving to come up? I went ahead and took the drink. What the hell? I'll get sober next month or whatever, right? All right, so and they pass through the well-known stages of a spree. So you know the stages of a spree? You drink, at some point you panic. At some point you wake up, it says emerging remorseful. And with a firm resolution not to drink again. How many of you have done that? How many of you have done it more than once? How many of you had an alcoholic loved one and you watched them do it and didn't understand it? And you were just devastated when they did it again? Because I know I'm talking to people that love addicts that watch it and they're like, this is maddening. Okay, and it says this is repeated over and over. And unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of his recovery. Now, the doctor is a Christian man, full disclosure. He's not an alcoholic. When he talks about an entire psychic change, he's using medical speak, but what he's talking to us about is living life in the spirit. I've got to feed the spirit, not the flesh. And if I don't do that, I will get tricked by the schemes of the enemy. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. And then it says, on the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol, the only effort necessary being not required to follow a few simple rules. Remember, this is his opinion. Those of us who are real alcoholics of the hopeless variety can tell you I don't control nothing. It was removed from me.
Right?
But I know to the untrained eye, what I appear to be exhibiting is that divine gift, self-control. At least in that matter. Yes? Okay. So I'm going to jump from there now. I'm really going to Bill's story. And I want to go to Bill's story, page 5, because I like stories better than therapy. My apologies to all the therapists. We're on page. They're restlessly chuckling at me. Anyway, so page 5, Bill's story. Bill's going to bring us up to where he's been through, he's made the money, he's been out partying and golfing, and having a great time, and people are starting to get worried about him. And now he's talking about that part in our story where pretty soon it went from fun to not fun to necessity. Yeah. Okay. So he says, liquor ceased to be a luxury; it became a necessity. Those are powerful words. How many of you? Where's my drinkers? You remember that? Where's my meth addicts? You remember that? And it was just a little bit to keep me awake a little longer. All right, I stayed up a little late last night. I'll be more efficient at work. Where's my opiate addicts? I'm just going to take the edge off. Exactly. Okay, so he describes it for him. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day, and often 3 got to be routine. Did you notice how you increased over time? It was kind of stealthy, wasn't it? Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s, and I would pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens. This went on endlessly, and I began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently. How many of you got there? Wake up with a little DT's action going on? What fixed it? If I can swallow it, another drink, right? And if I got to throw that one up, another one. Okay. So he says a tumbler full of gin followed by a half dozen bottles of beer would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. Look at the words these are. Those are powerful words. He didn't say desired. He said required. Nevertheless, now here's the mind. I still thought I could control the situation. Now think about what he's telling you. He runs up a tab at every bar, delicatessen and bar on the street. They don't even want to see him coming in anymore because he just wants something free. I'll catch you next week. That kind of crap. And then he's waking up shaking so bad if he doesn't get a drink, he can't even function. But I got this. We just get through today and it's going to be fine. Those of you that did the heroin run, did you have that dream that one day you were just going to slam dope like a gentleman? People think we kidding, huh? Mind's a powerful thing. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation, and there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. So he's talking about the people that are on the journey with us. Yeah. And then he says, gradually things got worse. Now, I always like Bill's description. For most people, his gradual getting worse are absolutely cataclysmic, life-changing events. But for those of us in that, it's gradual, baby. The house was taken over by the mortgage holder. That's like a big deal. You know that doesn't happen to most people more than once. How many of you had more than one? Yeah, whatever. My mother-in-law died. My wife and father-in-law became ill. How many of you noticed that? People around you are getting sick from worry. So. Then he says, then I got a promising business opportunity right in the middle of the storm, sunshine, right? Stocks were at a low point in 1932, and I had somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Then I went on a prodigious bender, and that chance vanished. For those of you who have never heard anyone use the word prodigious in a sentence, it means he got on a sick one. I mean, all else went out the door. You know what I mean? So I woke up. This had to be stopped. How many of you have had that experience? I saw I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. How many of you had such a resolution? Before then, I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business, and so I did. How many of you got to the point where you knew if you told somebody, you really had to stay after it? So like, oh, that like, and I told her too, so I did. So, y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, I can't let them down. Oh, you misjudge my ability to let people down. Shortly afterward, I came home drunk. Now, if you'll go with him, you'll know how bad that feels. Because he has involved other people that he does care about, and he cannot manifest any outward action to show it. That's what powerlessness is. Something's really horrific that I'm going through. I'm dragging other people through, and I am absolutely incapable of doing anything to stop it. And if you feel that, then you're starting to get what that admission of powerlessness is a real thing. It's not a theory. It's an experience. Right? So where had been my high resolve? So he's questioning himself. How many had such a question? You may not have said that. So I simply didn't know. How many of you were like Bill and didn't know? Because that's the thing. We like to say we know, but we don't know. Right? So it hadn't even come to mind. Someone had pushed a drink my way and I had taken it. Was I crazy? How many of you started questioning your own sanity quietly amongst yourself? So I began to wonder if such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. So Bill's going to tell you more than once what insanity is that he's talking about. But alcoholic insanity is not doing the same thing, expecting a different result. That's just what some drunk said in a meeting one time, and it caught on. Alcoholic insanity is an appalling lack of perspective. That I think temporary relief is worth me losing the house, the family, the business. Because that's what's going to happen. Probably my freedom too. Right? And so that's an appalling lack of perspective. And I'm not trying to be legalist here. When you're me and you're in the rooms and someone says it's doing the same thing, expecting a different result. Baby, I did the same thing with no expectation of a different result. Many times. This is going to suck. Watch. Get a camera. It'll be epic. And it's not even funny because most of us knew it was going to go all bad. Right? Yeah. So anyway, he says, renewing my resolve, I tried again. Some time passed and confidence began to be replaced by cocksureness. Again, kind of old words, but how many of you have had the experience of confidence being replaced by cocksureness? If I explain it to you as this, confusing the experience of grace with the illusion of control. A lot of people do it, and they don't have to be alcoholic to have that experience. Right? All right, so I could laugh at the Jen Mills. Now I had what it takes. One day I walked into a cafe to telephone, and no time at all, I was beating on the bar asking myself how it happened. So how many of you just found yourself wandered in, took a drink without any real thought, or went down to check on the fellows? Yeah, okay. And anyway, he says, as the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I'd manage better next time, but I might as well get good and drunk then. And I did. Guys, I got to point out to you, they're going to talk to us in this experience about how the alcoholic, for reasons yet obscure, has lost the power of choice in drink. But I still cling to the idea, even though the evidence is there, that I don't have any control in that regard. I still cling to it. So even when I'm already drinking and I know I'm going to get drunk, I'll convince myself I chose to do that. But the insanity that allowed me to do it happened before I ever took the drink. Does that make sense? So we'll keep telling ourselves, and even our fellows will tell us, oh, well, you chose to drink. You should have called. No, get on the roof, jump off. Halfway down, say, I choose to hit the ground. See if it softens your landing. It's really that serious. There was no choice in the matter. It just makes me feel better to believe there was a choice, even if I believe I've made the wrong choice. In fact, it perfects my self-condemnation that keeps me in the addictive cycle, keeps me in bondage. So then he goes on to talk about the experience. The remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. So those of you that have had that, take yourself there. He says it's unforgettable. Remorse, horror, hopelessness. Some of you went. Some of you are going, no, move past. I don't want to feel that. It is unforgettable, isn't it? How many of you have been through a serious life event? Everyone in here. The passing of somebody. It's also an experience of powerlessness. Remorse, horror, hopelessness. Same experience. Right? Okay. So it says the courage to do battle was not there. Courage to do battle was not there. How many of you got there? If I don't try again, I can't fail again. I'll just stay down. So he says, my brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity. How many of you have had that happen? A thought storm is what he's describing. So I hardly dare cross the street lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck, for it was scarcely daylight. An all-night place supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. My writhing nerves were stilled at last. A morning paper told me that the market had gone to hell again. Well, so had I. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. Then he says, that was a hard thought. How many of you got there? Not only am I not going to get well, I'm not going to try and get well. I'm going to just try and run it out. All right, so he says, should I kill myself? That's where a lot of us get, right? No, not now. Then a mental fog settled down. Jen would fix that. 2 bottles and oblivion. So back to what I know. I know it's poison, but it's my poison. Yeah? So it says the mind and body are marvelous mechanisms, for mine endured this agony 2 more years. I mean, you got stuck in active addiction and I know better and I can't get out. God, please, if you're real, I don't even know who you are, but please take me out of this. Yes? 2 more years for Bill. Sometimes I stole from my wife's slender purse when the morning terror and madness were on me. How many of you had that happen? Take from them when there's no other earthly explanation of where it went, and then lie right to their face. Help them look for it. Again, I swayed dizzily before an open window or the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing myself for a weakling. See, now he's talking about full-fledged self-condemnation. He's ready to put himself to death because he can't end that thought storm. So most of us that have ever been in this situation know exactly what he's talking about. There were flights from city to country and back as my wife and I sought escape. And then came the night when the physical and mental torture was so hellish, I feared I would burst through my window sash and all. Somehow I managed to drag my mattress to a lower floor, lest I suddenly leap. The doctor came with a heavy sedative. Next day found me drinking both gin and sedative. How many of you found yourself in that pickle? So then it says the combination soon landed me on the rocks. How many of you got an opiate prescription to help you come off of your alcohol? And then found out, wow, opiates were a reasonable substitute for alcohol withdrawal. Alcohol's a terrible substitute for opiate withdrawal. Yes? And then you are in a conundrum. Yes? Okay, so people feared for my sanity. So did I. I could eat little or nothing when drinking, and I was 40 pounds underweight. My brother-in-law is a physician, and through his kindness and that of my mother, I was placed in a nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics. Under the so-called belladonna treatment, my brain cleared. Hydrotherapy and mild exercise helped much. Best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that though certainly selfish and foolish, I'd been seriously ill bodily and mentally. So that's Silkworth encountering Bill for the first time, explaining to him the nature of the disorder he's in the grips of, right? And there wasn't very many places that, number one, addiction and alcoholism were not a diagnosis in those days. So these hospitals didn't exist except in concentrated populations. They were treating veterans coming back from World War I, that kind of thing. Make sense? So it relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor. So why would that relieve him?
It's not their fault. Yeah.
Let me off the hook. If I do need a healer, maybe I deserve one. Or maybe I can receive one because deserve's got nothing to do with it. Does that make sense? See, I'm not going to take a healing, even one I need, if I don't at least think that I can take it without consequence. Right? Because I'm just going to run to what I know. So then it says, to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects, my incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained. Understanding myself now, I fared forth in high hope. This is his first encounter, first treatment. And he said for 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high. That, too, is a weird description. But all he's talking about is he was, I got this. It's going good. Haven't had a drink in 60 days or whatever. Yeah? So I went to town regularly and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. So how many of you went to treatment and got some self-knowledge? How many of you drank again after a head full of self-knowledge? Well, we're right on schedule then. So, you always want to read further if you can answer in the affirmative. Because I promise there's a happy ending. But it was not, for the frightful day came when I drank once more. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. So he's painting a picture for you. How many of you stopped for a little bit of time and then went out again? Did you notice how it got bad quick? When you talk about going off like a ski jump, have you ever watched those guys go off a ski jump? Their feet are on the ground and then they're 30 feet in the air. Ooh, this is going to end badly. Yeah. So after a time, I returned to the hospital. So he had to go get beat up again. Yeah. And he said, this was to finish the curtain, it seemed to me. My weary and despairing wife was informed that it would all end with heart failure during delirium tremens, or I would develop a wet brain perhaps within a year. She would soon have to give me over to the undertaker or the asylum. They did not need to tell me. I knew and almost welcomed the idea. Can you relate to him? I understand I'm dying. Can you tell me when? Right? So it was a devastating blow to my pride. How many of you got to that point? Now I'm drinking out of just pride. I'm using out of just pride. Because I'm not going to be that guy. Yes? Any of you had preconceived ideas of what homeless drug addicts or felons or whatever it looked like until you got to pass through those gates? Most of us had an idea in our mind what life was and what I'd never do until we did it and it went by like a freaking road sign. So I, who had thought so well of myself and my abilities, of my capacity to surmount obstacles, was cornered at last. Bill's a war hero, right? He's been in a very bloody, very personal war, and he's back, and he's won commendations, and then he'd been big in business, and he'd made lots of money, and people stepped and fetched, and now he's going to die in a gutter. So he says, now I was to plunge into the dark, joining that endless procession of sots who had gone on before. I thought of my poor wife. There had been much happiness after all. What would I not give to make amends? But that was over now. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. How many of you got to the place where you just wanted it to end, if not for the sake of the people that were watching you go through it? That's probably your first step experience. Because really the first step admission is when I turn my thoughts to others. When I turn my thoughts to others, even in the throes of my addiction, a window opens into my consciousness and God comes in. Yeah. So he tells you that because all of a sudden we're willing to do things we were never willing to do. And we think, oh, I'm willing. Not. He injected you with righteousness. But you had to turn your thoughts to another first. That's why it's so profound in that story, because every one of you, if we sat down and got your story, I could see a place in your story before things started going the other way that you turned your thoughts to another. Okay, so then it says, quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I met my match. I'd been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master, and there's his admission of powerlessness. Right? All right, so trembling, I stepped from the hospital a broken man. Fear sobered me for a bit. Then came the insidious insanity of that first drink, and on Armistice Day 1934, I was off again. The insanity of the first drink. So don't get it twisted. The insanity of alcoholism's got nothing to do with the consequences of me drinking. The insanity of alcoholism is an appalling lack of perspective. It precedes the first drink, and it's because I've disavowed all things meaningful in life in order to take that drink. Makes no sense, right? So everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere or would stumble along to a miserable end. How dark it is before the dawn. So all of you who have gone through various experiences of powerlessness, now we're going to start talking about a little bit of hit of hope and a little bit of potential, right? So it says, in reality, that was the beginning of my last debauch, the beginning of my last one. So he's sober again. There's still one more to come, but in retrospect, he was on a path now. Yeah? I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. The known world was kind of three-dimensional, yes? And so we have what height, width, depth, whatever. And what they discovered about this time was this dimension of time and space. But if I'm beyond that, if I'm in the fourth dimension of existence, then I'm beyond time and I'm beyond space. And the only place that happens is I'm here and I'm now. So if I'm existing in the here and now, what can come against me? Right? Yeah? Okay. So then he's going to tell you what that feels like. I was to know, look at the words, I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. So progressive recovery in exchange for hopeless death sentence if I'll stay in the manner of living. And how do I know what it looks like? Well, I'm going to know happiness, peace, and usefulness. That's what it feels like. So I should take those of you that are freaking out about what's the spiritual life look like. It looks like happiness, peace, and usefulness. And it's his testimony. It's similarly my testimony. Make sense? So near the end of that bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen. With a certain satisfaction, I reflected there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through that night and the next day. My drinkers, where are you? Were you guys hiders? So if you guys don't know, drinkers are hiders.
So are tweakers.
Tweakers are clever. Literally got to cut the seams out of their underwear to make sure they don't get in there to detox and just spin everybody up. I ain't lying, am I? No, man, they got pouches everywhere. Don't even get into our incarcerated bunch. They got pouches y'all don't want to talk about. Ouch. Yeah, okay. I digress. With a certain satisfaction, I reflected there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through that night and the next day. My wife was at work, so the stage is set. I wondered whether I dare hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our bed. I would need it before daylight. Those of you, if you took it out far enough, we had to have something to eat before we could even move. We had to get something to stop the nausea, right? So if I'm going to have to try and pretend like I'm normal, I'm going to have to be able to sneak a few before I can even navigate out of here. Okay, so my musing was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old school friend asked if he might come over. He was sober. Now that's in italics, and I want to tell you why they do that. They want to call your attention to it as an extravagant or extraordinary event, right? And so if any of you took your addiction out very far, did you notice no matter how far you took it, you always maintained that one friend that at least I'm not that bad yet? Okay, so Ebby, the man calling, is I'm not that bad yet to Bill, right? So now they're going to talk a little bit about Ebby's coming over. It was years since I remember his coming to New York in that condition. What condition? Ebby don't go nowhere sober. I was amazed. Rumor had it that he'd been committed for alcoholic insanity. I wonder how he'd escaped. That's how impossible it is for this cat to be sober. He had to have escaped imprisonment for alcoholic insanity, because that's what they did. Because there ain't no way no wonder he's coming to New York. He's on the lam. So of course he would have dinner, and then I could drink openly with him, unmindful of his welfare. I thought only of recapturing the spirit of other days. There was that time we had chartered an airplane to complete a jag. His coming was an oasis in this dreary desert of futility. The very thing, an oasis. Drinkers are like that. They call your attention to the way he was thinking, so you need to go with him in his thinking to find your experience. Do you know what an oasis is? Yeah, it may be life-sustaining water in a very arid place, but more likely than not, it could be just more sand mirroring an illusion. So although he's had plenty of sand, he sees this as an oasis. He's thinking, we drink, it's all good. No one's going to know the wiser. Wife's out of town. It's going to be, right? So the door opened and he stood there fresh-skinned and glowing. I call your attention to the description of one man about his drinking buddy who's also a man. Strange way to describe him, fresh-skinned and glowing. So something's different, right? We can agree there's something different about that. There was something about his eyes. You ever seen someone in active addiction and just looked at them and just know those eyes are dead? There's not life in there. You ever seen anyone on their way back? How the eyes are different? That's what he's talking about. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? So now he's instantly going inward. He's trying to, what is this? See, Bill's seeing a miracle, but Bill doesn't believe in miracles. So this is very perplexing. So then he goes on to say, come, what's all this about? I queried. He looked straight at me, simply but smilingly. He said, I've got religion. Now, let's admit it. I don't care what your religious leanings are, if you've been raised in a church or if you've never been to one and been afraid to go. When you sit down drunk and drinking and your friend tells you that what's happened to him is he's got religion, your fun meter goes, because I'm about to get a lecture. Yes? Isn't that how we think? This is going to suck. So I was aghast. So that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now I suspected a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire, all right, but bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin will last longer than his preaching. Now, here's the first thing. He had an expectation of a religious experience from a religious person, and what he had was a walking, talking miracle. And so what happened was the guy said he did no ranting. He, in a matter-of-fact way, he told how two men had appeared in court persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. I don't know why in our modern fellowships we don't tell people, we say all kinds of silly things. I'm spiritual, not religious. We have a religious idea. God dwells in you. God dwells in you. And a practical manner of living to walk it out, to prove that fact to you through you. Does that make sense? And we owe everybody we encounter that explanation. My old buddy Paul used to say, give that news like the mailman. You just put it in the box and you walk away. You don't wait for them to read it and see if they liked it. None of my business. It's just truth. If it affects you badly, you ought to look at that. All right. He had come to pass his experience along to me if I cared to have it. Notice what he said. What is my job as a recovered alcoholic? To pass that, to impart that spiritual experience onto you. It's my never-ending debt. No ranting, no railing, no preaching, just the facts. Yes? His blood, word of my testimony. And some of you may know that from another book. We get access to that power. We get cleansed by that blood. Whatever dirt was on you, you'll be clean again. So I was shocked but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. He goes on to tell how he talked for hours. I don't have that kind of time. So I'm going to jump over real quick to page 12. And I'm going to talk about Bill's doubts, why the manner of living, why someone walking with us, mentorship, sponsorship is important to walk it out. It says, despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me vestiges of my old prejudice. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified. I didn't like the idea. I could go for such conceptions as creative intelligence, universal mind, or spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of a czar of the heavens, however loving his sway might be. I have since talked with scores of men who felt the same way. My friend suggested what then seemed a novel idea. He said, why don't you choose your own conception of God? One more thing, a lot of people over the years have said a God of my conception, a God of my understanding. That's not what they said. They're going to tell you about the experience to look for first, right? But he's still going to meet me where I am. So if I am an unbeliever and a defiant one, he'll meet me right there. Does that make sense? So it says that statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. Wow, I have permission to be what I have become, and I'm still going to be the recipient of this lift. And the answer is yes, right? And then he says, it was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point upon the foundation of complete willingness. I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it?
Of course.
And that's where we're going to leave you. Will you have it? Next week, we'll look at step 2. We'll look at the encounter, and we'll get rocking.